And now on Who's Views, a Doctor Who fan joins JT for a little chit-chat.
Hello everybody, it's us at Who's Views. Welcome back. It's good to see you, and it's time for Chitchat. And look who's joining me for this show. It's the one and only third Doctor Ian. Yay!
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to Chitchat.
Thank you. This is very exciting. Been looking forward to this, I've got to be honest.
We've been planning this for so long, haven't we?
We have. Yeah.
Well, you know how this works. You can take this wherever you want to go, and you can talk about whatever, but the question I always start with is, well, you know, how did you find the Doctor?
Right. Well, it's quite easy for me. It was I think it was sort of by accident. It's one of those things where you have a very clear, piercing memory of something, but you can't remember the 5 minutes before it, if that makes sense. So I can trace my love of Doctor Who, my following and watching of Doctor Who, back to March 1973, because it was episode 6 of Frontier in Space. Yeah. And my only memory of that is the Master appearing on a cliff and hundreds of Daleks appearing on the cliff behind him. And of course, reality, when you see it 20 odd years later on a bootleg VHS, was that there was like 2 or 3 Daleks filmed from multiple angles. But to the mind of a 6-year-old at the time, that was hundreds of Daleks. And I think that might have sort of like merged a bit into the following story, which is, you know, my favorite Dalek story, as you know, Planet of the Daleks, because that was my first full story. It was also a Dalek story, but there was also hundreds and thousands of Daleks in that. So I think it might have. So my earliest memory is literally it's a little bittersweet because it's Delgado's final, of course, because he died shortly after, and criminal that was. And but I can't remember anything before it. I can't remember earlier in that episode. I can't remember anything else in that story or any other story before it. I remember watching Sea Devils on one of the repeats. Yeah, because I know it was repeated more than once, excluding the recent rubbish, but I can't remember which one it was. So I think it might have been the Saturday afternoon one, which would come just after Frontier in Space and Planet of the Daleks and Green Death and things like that. So, I just had the telly on and saw it and was, you know, that was it. It caught
captivated.
Yeah. And what the hell is this? And I watched every single episode from Planet of the Daleks 1 onwards.
Fantastic.
And it was absolutely captivating. There was nothing on TV like it. Still hasn't been. And I include the 2005 stuff in that. It is not like the original Doctor Who, certainly not from the 60s and 70s. I knew it went down a slightly more lighter track in the 80s, but it was still recognizably Doctor Who, whereas, you know, but the 60s and 70s had a particular something. It was that lightning in a bottle thing that they've not been able to capture subsequently, I don't think. But that's how I found it.
It's amazing, isn't it? That example there, you know, what you're saying there is that you remember the Master and thousands of Daleks on a cliff top. It's amazing how our memory as kids, or our imagination fills in those gaps for us, isn't it? I mean, they knew what they were doing back in the day, didn't they? They knew that if they only had 4 props, we would see more than the 4 in memory.
Oh, yeah, because they knew their audience. They knew what they were doing. They were comfortable in their skin as producers of a fantastic show that was incredibly popular, that had a very charismatic and popular lead actor and companions and supporting cast. They were very comfortable, and they knew what, but they didn't take their audience for granted. They didn't take advantage. They didn't talk down to their audience of any age. You know, I would generally watch it on my Todd, but when other family members were there, they would sit down and they would watch it partially in silence out of fear of me, it's 6-year-olds stay quiet. But they also enjoyed it. You could tell people enjoyed it. Pertwee carried gravitas. Tom Baker carried gravitas. And it was. It's strange, really, when you look at it through the lens of 21st century Who, to quite explain. I mean, I know obviously the box sets and DVDs and everything are all there for people to see what it was like. But you have to, in order to get the idea of what it was actually like, you have to have watched it in the era that it was transmitted, because it was a product of its age. So part of it went into what was going on around you. You can watch The Green Death now, and it's great. It's fantastic. I watched it the other week. It's fantastic. But if you watch The Green Death and to an extent the later Monster of Peladon, if you watch that in the shadow of miners' strikes and power cuts in the early half of the 1970s, then it has a different kind of nuance, because it was all relating to miners and things like that, and that was very much in the news, but it wasn't preachy or political. If you were watching as a child, you didn't pick up on that. You picked up on people underground and monsters and maggots and glowing stuff that you mustn't touch and everything else. And the Doctor and Joe still sends a shiver. They're climbing up that pipe as the tank's being emptied, and they have to get out before, oh my God.
Yeah. Hurry up.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. Honestly, wonderful stuff.
It is.
But watching it in the 70s was different, because the world and your worldview was different, and you were also a lot younger. But you didn't need CGI or anything like that to recreate thousands of Daleks on that cliff. As a child, your mind did that.
Absolutely.
And that was the genius of the program. They knew their limitations, so they built it around it.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, you mentioned the Green Death there, and you mentioned the Peladon stories as well. These are especially the Green Death, and we know this because we've seen this. These are the stories that are brought out today by anybody that's bringing the argument, oh, Doctor Who's always been woke, it's always been far left, it hasn't, all this sort of stuff. They're the stories that are always put out, aren't they, really? But it's interesting, because I've always thought, well, actually the whole difference, and I want your take on this, the whole difference was, for me, is that back in the day, they were inspired by events around them. So they were inspired to write a science fiction story based around the miners' strike. They were inspired to write a science fiction story based around environmental issues. It was the inspiration for a story. It wasn't, as it seems to be today, there's the issue, let's write a story around it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And they did that. They did that 2 seasons running, really. With Monster of Peladon and the miners, and Green Death and the miners. And there was miners' strikes going through a good few years of the 1970s. I mean, a miners' strike, if I remember rightly, and I was very young, but they brought down a government, which was sort of like showing that the unions had too much power. Because a government should be brought down or put in by the people, not by a union. And that's where the 1970s went completely off track.
Yeah.
But and that's later where they tried it with Margaret Thatcher, and not expressing any preferences here, but they tried it with Margaret Thatcher, and of course they got it completely wrong, and that's what broke the unions. And they thought then that a union could bring down a government, which it should never be able to do.
Yeah.
And they failed in the 80s, but they succeeded in the 70s. So it was very topical, but it didn't at any time say you should be left-wing or socialist.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the miners in the Green Death, they weren't on strike. The pit had already closed, so there was nothing to go on strike from. Mm-hmm. They were protesting outside the chemical factory.
That's right.
Different. It looked like a picket line, but it wasn't.
No, it was a protest. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, and they'd in fact, it was 2 protests, really, wasn't it? Because it was the ex-miners protesting, and then it was the all the environmentalists with Professor Jones, who would now be called the Greens. But, you know, the Greens now and the Greens then, I mean, the Greens then were concerned about the environment. The Greens now, I mean, God knows what they believe, and I honestly wouldn't want to guess. But
yeah, it's very questionable now, isn't it, really?
Yeah, but they weren't saying Harold Wilson is right, Ted Heath is wrong, or vice versa. That, you know, and for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, prime ministers it was a bit of a seesaw between them, wasn't it? And then Callaghan came in before Thatcher at the end of the 70s. That was pretty much what the 70s was like.
Yeah.
And it never got preachy like that at all. It was just there's a conflict here. If anything, it was like working class and upper class, but it was never right wing, left wing. You know, it was more subtle than that, because they had skilled writers and they had skilled script editors and skilled producers. And what we have now, as we know, is a showrunner, which is pretty much somebody who was empowered by the BBC to push their own personal agendas. And it's entirely different. Which is why it's gone off the rails and crashed and burned, really, I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, the whole thing about the original series and the way it was set up and how television in Britain was set up in the old days, you had a team of people, didn't you? And they weren't all on the same page.
God, no. I mean, I think Terrance Dicks was, and I think we've discussed this before, haven't we? I think Terrance Dicks is sort of like was slightly right of centre. But then you had Mac Hull, that was so left wing. He would have been on the balcony watching the march by in Moscow every year, you know, alongside Brezhnev in the 70s. Yeah. But and no disrespect to him at all if that's what he believed. But the thing was, the two of them got on like a house on fire. They shared a house for a while, I believe, and they were great, great, great friends. And that's the thing. You can have absolutely opposite views and be the best of friends, you know. And somebody I used to work with, he is so left-wing. It's unbelievable. I mean, absolutely so far left-wing. It's crazy. And our political views are completely different. But I love the guy. I think he's great. And, you know, he lives down in Worcestershire, so we don't see each other very often. But I would drop anything and go and have a few beers with him one night, because he's one of the nicest people I could possibly know. You can have different views but still be the best of friends. But nowadays, I don't know what's behind it, really. I don't know if it's lack of education, lack of mental strength, lack of processing ability in the brain. I don't know. But what you have now is you have certain cultish elements, and we know one cult in particular, whereby the view is, if you can't agree, if you aren't the same, then you have to display hate and violence, whilst at the same time accusing your opponent of being hateful and violent. You know, it's almost gaslighting in a way. You accuse them of being something whilst actually doing it yourself. Yeah. And it's so sad. You know, it's so sad, really. But Mac Hulk and Terrance Dicks are perfect cases in point. All of them working to another guy who was a Buddhist. You know, how, and I'm going to use a word here, how diverse. Yeah. But of course, diversity only came in the 21st century, didn't it? Because it didn't exist before. Just like there weren't powerful women, Sarah Jane, brackets, not a lesbian, close brackets. Yeah. Just for Sadie's benefit there. Idiot.
It is. I mean, you're right, though. I mean, it is an issue, isn't it? And it is a problem, and it's infiltrated society. The fact that people seem to believe that they can judge others on their own outlook in life, but to see it come into Doctor Who as well, that's been heartbreaking.
It's been awful. I mean, Doctor Who has always been escapism. I mean, let's be honest. The majority, I would say, sticking my neck out, and quite happy to be corrected, but I would say that for pretty much all of us classic Doctor Who fans, at one point or another, Doctor Who probably saved us. You know, at one point or another, we'd have been in some life situation, and we would have either thought, what would the Doctor do? Or, you know, shall I look at this as if I'm the Doctor or something like that, because it stops you being reactionary. It stops you doing knee-jerk stuff. It makes you pause and think. And, you know, it's really done good for us. Whereas New Who, I just can't, and I hate that term, because it's not new anymore. Is it 20 odd years old? It's, I don't think you could probably say the same. If anything, it's just, instead of inspiring or saving, it's attempted to indoctrinate, divide, and destroy. And it's such a shame. It's such a shame. It came back with so much goodwill, and it managed to sustain that goodwill for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And all it did was turn around and say, all of you that showed all that goodwill, this isn't actually for you, go away. And of course we have gone away. And now they've, you know, it's the perfect example of F around and find out, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's in the toilet.
Yeah, and they deserve it. But then again, that's where they did most of their writing. So I suppose it's quite poetic, really, isn't it?
I mean, it is sad, isn't it? Because it's not, I mean, it's not just Doctor Who. It's happened to all the other science fiction and fantasy franchises. And you know, Ian, I've got this strong belief it's because these judgmental people looked at science fiction in general and just assumed it was full of white heterosexuals because they were coming in from the outside. They had no idea. And how wrong were they? You know, when we were going to Doctor Who conventions throughout the 90s, for heaven's sake. I don't remember once ever assuming anybody's religion or, you know, sexuality or whatever, you know, because we were just all fans. We were just all fans getting together. And
it never came into it, did it? It never came into it. It just wasn't relevant. It wasn't relevant. It wasn't important. And I am sure in the 26-year run of the original series, I'm sure there was a huge proportion of gay men, lesbian women, either in front of camera or behind camera.
Yeah.
And at no time was it ever relevant. And at no time was it ever important to what they were doing in front of camera.
Yeah.
Or behind camera. It was never, ever, ever relevant to the narrative of that show.
Yeah.
And the problem is, it's now the narrative of that show. It has no traction unless it is focused on some kind of behavior
or label
that's related to sexuality. And you could not be further from the basics of what Doctor Who was always about. And it's such a shame. It's such a shame. But it shows you ultimately how little these alleged, you know, super fans from the days of the tavern drinking club that we refer to so many times, how much these alleged super fans actually don't understand about the show. What they've done is they've taken their own interpretation and just arrogantly assumed that their interpretation is right. And the problem is their interpretation couldn't be more wrong, but they're the ones that have been given the reins of power by the BBC and have dragged it to where it is now. It's simple as that. You know, RTD, Moffat, Chibnall, Gatiss, all of them like that. You know, they've given the impression that they know what they're talking about. And the body of work that they've produced has shown the opposite to be true, really. And I don't see how they can ever salvage any credibility. Why RTD has been given the chance to do another story, it's unbelievable. I mean, you know, anywhere else with that track record of failure, you would have been sacked.
Oh, totally. A long time ago.
Yeah. Anywhere else. Yeah. Anywhere else. But here, for some reason, oh dear, you know, you screwed up. You wasted £100 million. Have another go. Where else does that happen? But it's the BBC, who don't have to account for their failure, who don't have to pay the bills for their failure, because the mugs that are the license payers have to do. And it's they can afford to fail repeatedly because they aren't paying for it personally. And perhaps they should, you know, which is why they should be defunded, I think.
Well, certainly if BBC Studios keep carrying the can as they have done, because they are funded by the taxpayer, the license fee payer, they have to justify it through obviously through sales of the show, but also the merchandising.
I think when they do their accounts, though, and it shows millions of pounds lost and things like that, there tends to be a shaking of heads, sucking in of air through the teeth, and oh dear, this isn't very good enough, and then they move on, and then the cycle happens all over again. And there needs to be accountability, but we never seem to have a government that's prepared to do it. The Tories, they backed out of doing it just in the same way that they wet themselves and backed out of doing the sale of Channel 4. So we have to keep paying for that, and privatising the BBC and making iPlayer go to subscription only and all their programming through that. That's the way it should be. We know that, but nobody's got the guts to do it. Labour won't do it because they like taxing things too much, and at the end of the day, the licence fee is a tax. So it's right up Labour's street. So they're never going to do it. But it's yet another shame, isn't it? So many shames.
Yeah. Well, there is. And it seems to me that the last 15 years of having Doctor Who back has all been shame, 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 because it just seems to have gone, for one reason or another, it came back as a powerhouse, let's face it, because as you say, we were all there to bring it back and support it and nurture it and sell it, which we did. But then it's gone on, it's gone on, it's gone on. It's found a fan base of its own, some of whom I say, or some of which I say is not healthy. But now it seems to be going down and down and down, and yet there's an element that are clinging to it, denying everything is going down. And I just sometimes wonder how complacent must these people be behind the scenes to allow it to fall down and still keep producing it? Surely there must come a time where they just go, oh, this isn't worth it anymore.
Well, you do wonder, because it was in a much, it wasn't in a brilliant place, but it was in a healthier place in 1989 when they canned it. It was in a significant.
There was an audience that wanted it back in 1990.
Yeah. And what, all right, JNT, bless him, God bless him, but he was tired and he wanted to go. He should have been allowed to go. There should have been a new producer. And if they'd given it a fraction of the money that New Who's had, then it would have blasted through the 1990s and made it to the millennium. I have absolutely no doubt. But they didn't, and they kept the series down to a very short number of episodes, multiple times a week, so it was out the way quickly. And it was gone before you knew it. You got a new series of Doctor Who starting, and then just a few weeks later it was gone. And it faded from the public eye, because one of the things about Doctor Who was it was on 26 weeks of the year. It wormed its way into your consciousness.
It did, yes.
And
everybody knew it.
Yeah, and it did it a bit when Eccleston came back, but there was still, right from the very start, you mentioned 15 years, but if you look at it, really, right from Rose, episode 1, series 1, 2005, RTD gets the word gay in there, doesn't he? Well, that word worked. He's gay and she's an alien, or the other way around, or whatever. So he got the word in. So it's probably getting quite excited about that. And then he had Jackie Tyler coming onto him while she's doing her hair and everything.
That was awful, wasn't it?
And when he saw that, and he just looked at her, and then he went, no, and walked off. You thought, that's the Doctor, he's not interested. But then by episode 13, to get the time vortex out of Rose, he's giving her a big tonguey kiss. It's like, can you imagine Tom Baker doing that with Sarah Jane?
No.
And I'll just say again, no, Sadie, she wasn't a lesbian. But can you imagine the Fourth Doctor locking lips with Sarah Jane or Leela?
No.
To extract the time vortex? Absolute rubbish.
They would have had the imagination to come up with another way of doing it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, but RTD's no. Let's have them locking lips. Let's have an exchange of bodily fluids, because that's RTD. Yeah. And then you've got Father's Day as well, haven't you? Where there was some overt sexual talking about one night stands in alleyways and things like that. And you're like, come on. And this was series 1. So really, it was that way. And then you've got Tennant's Doctor and Rose simping for him, and then the big kissy with the alternate Doctor and all this kind of thing with when they went back, when he had a duplicate Doctor with the Dalek story at the end, not parting of the ways. Oh, they all meld into one, don't they?
Oh, no,
you know the one I mean, with Donna. That's the one. And then you've got into the Matt Smith stuff, and Matt Smith was brilliant. Don't get me wrong, but probably the best one of all the 21st century Doctors. To be fair, his stories with Moffat were littered with sexuality. I mean, if somebody did what Amy's character did to the Doctor, where she virtually went for a full-on sexual assault, they'd have been arrested if they did that in real life. And that was acceptable. How the hell did that get past the BBC? I mean, you literally have somebody trying to sexually assault the lead character.
Yeah.
And it's just made all jokey and everything else. And then you have size gags in Vampires of Venice, where Rory has a torch, so the Doctor has a bigger torch. We know where
I don't retain all this nonsense because I just dismiss it. I do remember the equivalent scene, which was replayed in Day of the Doctor with the sonic screwdrivers.
Yeah, and they extend. Yeah, absolutely. It's all. Let's have a little play on penis length. Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah,
and it's Moffat, because Moffat, when he was doing coupling and everything, it was all sex jokes and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, I didn't watch it. I saw half an episode once where they had a shop that had a Dalek prop in it, naturally, and it was all sex jokes. So you had a rough idea what to expect with Moffat. But then Capaldi came, and he had the best potential, but it was unrealized potential. And I wish Capaldi had never done it, because I think it broke his memory. And his love of the show, which is absolutely tragic. But then you've got Chibnall and Whittaker, and then you've got RTD and Gatwell, where it became virtual porn. And it's just, my God, you have no idea what Doctor Who is. You've just turned it into a platform for your own perversions. And that's really sad. And you're just dressing up your perversions with the props that we all relate to from our wonderful memories of the original series. Yeah. And let's face it, we've said it before, if it wasn't for us, the ones that they've told that the show wasn't for, but if it hadn't been for us, there wouldn't have been a series 2, 3 or 4, because we were the ones that gave it the support and got other people viewing. Not them, it was us.
Yeah,
but we're obviously worthless to them. We've gone and we're not coming back.
It's hard for any of the newer fans to understand what 2004, 2005, and into 2006 was like, because they've grown up with it and it's been a success, and they just assumed it was a success. It wasn't. I mean, when it came back, when it was announced it was coming back in 2004, there was a sort of muted, outside of the Doctor Who fandom in the UK, there was a muted, oh, that's interesting, from the general public. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, but I remember a lot of people saying, "Oh, it won't be the same. Well, it's not going to be the same." But I was like, and millions of others, we were there, ready for it. We'd been waiting for 15 years for this thing. We had a great time, I have to admit, in those wilderness years. It was wonderful.
Oh yeah,
there were many of us that were with trepidation. Were going, "Oh, I'm not sure about it," but we were there. A lot of us were there to welcome it back. And we did, but we worked hard. We sold that 2005 series to the public. Have you seen this? Oh, it's brilliant. Have you seen this? It's really good. Oh, this is really good. We did the same in 2006. And if it hadn't been for us, you're right. The people that are around today that grew up with it, they wouldn't have it today, because we worked our asses off to support Doctor Who when it came back.
God. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many years a generation classes as, but it was is it 20 or 25 years? But there was the best part of a generational gap between Doctor Who finishing and Doctor Who coming back.
Yeah.
If you brackets, apologies, Paul, close brackets, forget McGann, there was literally a generational gap between 1989 and Survival and 2005 and Rose.
Yeah.
So it was entirely 100% the work of the existing fan base that kept it going through that 15, 16 years of nothing, that bought the books, that kept that magazine going, that bought the VHSs, that started buying the DVDs, that convinced them that there was a market, that they realized it was a finite market because ultimately you will have released everything and you'll run out of new formats to release everything on. So you need new material. And bringing it back was probably a smart idea. It was entirely down to us, all of us, you know. And I know, all right, I'll accept that people like Gatiss played a little part in keeping it in the public consciousness, because I wasn't an avid viewer, but I saw 2 or 3 episodes of League of Gentlemen.
Oh yeah.
There was one scene where a guide was walking some people through some caves, and it might have even been Gatiss playing the guide character, and made a comment about how Cybermen and Sarah Jane Smith and the Doctor were filming just down there, and obviously it was a throwback to Revenge of the Cybermen. Yeah. And to me that was like, oh, Doctor Who's got a mention on the telly. Yeah. And things like that, because I didn't really know about Gatiss then. I might call that the good old days, because I certainly know about him now. But it was nice Doctor Who getting a mention. So yeah, I suppose he put a part in, and of course Doctor Who won the BBC's 60th award, didn't it?
That was a good night.
Much to the hatred of the EastEnders cast.
Oh yeah, do you remember that? I remember I was on my way out that night, and I was getting ready, and it just happened to be on the television, and I'd seen Sylvester and Peter Davison in the audience, and I knew Doctor Who was up for the nomination because what could happen, for those that don't know, you could nominate through the Radio Times. And I actually remember, Ian, going out to buy the Radio Times at that point just to put my nomination in and put it in.
Me too. Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
So I was on my way, I was getting ready to go out, and I was just about to switch off the telly to go out when they said the best drama. And I thought, oh, okay, let's have a look and see where it gets or what happens. And everybody, absolutely everybody, was expecting EastEnders to win.
Yeah.
And I had to sit down. When they announced it was Doctor Who, I was like, what? Yeah. And it was just a momentous time, wasn't it?
This was
McCoy were like,
yeah, they didn't expect it. And I love Peter Davison's comment about maybe they'll see sense and bring it back one day. And that was speaking for all of us, which goes back to what we've said in the show previously, you know, Peter Davison for producer. But he knew that there was a demand for it, and said it then in front of everybody. But this was pre-internet campaigns. This was pre-social media. This was simply people going to the effort of putting in a vote, going out, buying the Radio Times magazine. Yeah. Why else would you? Doctor Who wasn't on, so why would you want the Radio Times? You go and buy it.
Exactly.
And you send in your vote. This was actual proper real people. They couldn't argue it was faked, which probably made the shock bite a little bit deeper, really, which was great.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the whole thing about this being pre-internet is that, you know, had that happened now, it would be, of course, the equivalent of review bombing now, where they accuse people of review bombing for not having the same opinion. But now it would be like I do. I always say you can't trust the iPlayer 28 days or whatever, because it's Doctor Who fans going back to watch it over and over and over again, which they do. But this was different. This was the fact that yes, the Doctor Who fans would have had their say in the vote, but it was such a huge result. It was the British public playing on their nostalgia as well, saying, oh, Doctor Who, that was brilliant. It was the magic of those days. Remember, Ian, because, you know, back in those days before it came back, it was bookended. You had the beginning, you had the middle, and you had the end, and that was it. It was perfect. And I think that's why we had it so nice, in a sense, during the wilderness years, those 15 years off air, because we were able to go with hindsight to conventions and you know, we weren't necessarily concerned about what was coming next or who's going to be next to produce this, and how, you know, we certainly didn't have the political element.
No,
it was a nice time.
It really was. And I think I think it owes a lot to what was built up during the 80s, because obviously there was fandom in the 70s and the first conventions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there was something different that was built up during the 80s, which was things got a little bit more organized and you had a bit more expression of opinion. So you had the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, which again I know started in the 70s, but you had kind of like a sustained growth of the DWAS at the time.
Yeah.
And
they definitely found their format.
Oh yeah, and then it had its fanzine TARDIS, and then of course that triggered fanzines full stop, because you had other fanzines, big ones like Scaro with Simon Lydiard, and I went to a little convention of his once in Bath, and first time I saw the Mind Robber was at his little convention in Bath.
Oh wow, I love that story.
Yeah. But then all of a sudden there was a swath of fanzines, and of course you had Celestial Toy Room, which was the Doctor Who Appreciation Society magazine, which was literally sheets of paper stapled in a corner at that point. And you could pay to have a little advert for your fanzine in it, and then people would write in with a check or a postal order, and you would send them a copy of the fanzine. And I got a few fanzines, I've still got them. And then for school friends of mine, so this would have been 1983-4, we did one of our own, so we had a fanzine for a couple of years.
What was yours?
Ours was called Eye of Horus.
Yeah, you see, so, a lot of us will remember that. I remember that being advertised in Celestial Toy Room when the DWAS newsletter came through. Yeah, it's
mad, really. And one of the there was a couple of older ones, a couple of years older than me, and then me and another lad who was the same year, and then another lad called Russ, who now you occasionally hear on Radio 4 when they do on the Morning Today news program, when they want some financial expert, somebody from the financial market. They'll call in a guy called Russ. I'm not going to say his surname, but they'll call in somebody called Russ. And when they said his name, I was like, what? And then I listened and I thought, yeah, that's him. Because he had a very distinctive voice.
Hey, he's done well then, hasn't he?
He's done very well, actually, and all power to him. He was a nice lad. And so there's 5 of us. And one of them, the 2 older ones, they fell out. And one of them went off and did his own magazine called Zygon, which didn't last for very long, 2 or 3 issues. And I was friends with a lad in Wales called John, who had a magazine called Mondas that I did a couple of things for. But it was a great time, and I think that formed the basis for what then picked up when the internet and the chat groups. It was originally the chat groups, all the alt groups, Doctor Who, and all that kind of thing. That then became, other things. Outpost Gallifrey was one of them, obviously, like it or loathe it, and I think that merged or morphed into what's Gallifrey base now, didn't it, and everything. But
couldn't tell you.
Yeah, it was.
I got pretty sort of. I looked at these things a bit. I thought, no, this is going away. I don't like. Because I was a big fan of the fanzines as well. But you're right. I mean, they have evolved. What we effectively do on Who's Views is a live fanzine.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, absolutely, it is. And some fan websites were online fanzines. Because let's face it, you still reached your audience, but you didn't have all the bloody printing costs, which was sometimes quite exorbitant, and the envelopes and the stamps and everything else, or having to go to the bank with the postal orders and checks and put them in and stuff like that, and remember who's put an order in to make sure you post it out, because, you don't want bad press and everything else. It was a hell of a time, and it was great fun. It was great fun. And you had people having ding-dongs. And I remember...
Nothing like to say, though.
Well, no, but the Scaro magazine had a letters page, and somebody was doing a riposte to somebody else's comments and everything, and it was they were having a go at somebody who'd used a name called Sari Gerus. I don't know why that name just sits in there, but it is. I can find the magazine. I've still got it. And of course, they were referring to Gary Russell. It was an anagram.
Yeah. That was. Is it an anagram? Is it a John Nathan Turner special?
I think it must have been. Yeah, because this person, I think they were accusing Gary of writing a letter under the name of Sally Gerus. And it was whoa, read this, and that was as exciting as it got in the 80s, because it was snail mail, and but it was a great time, and it made the foundations for what came with the dawn of the internet age, really.
Yeah. And the other thing about it was as well is that, do you remember Manners? I used to love going to the conventions in the late 80s, definitely the late 80s into the 90s, all around the UK, right? All around the UK. The Dwaz ones as well. I got to them towards definitely in the 90s at some point. It's all a blur. But I just remember just a great sense of joy and happiness, the ability to agree to disagree. Not that we had much to disagree on, because nobody really got themselves into the state that we all get ourselves into today of complete arguments, because today it's more political. And sometimes I do feel the case is that we've got to stop a certain rise of whatever it's going to be, because they're pushing too much. But in our day, that wasn't in Doctor Who at all. I mean, the nearest you would get was who was the best Doctor, of which you only had 7 to choose from, which were happy days, because it's gone mad these days. Who was your best companion, which wasn't a big falling out discussion. And it didn't really, it was just manners. Everything was more polite. Everybody seemed to be nice to each other. Okay, I know there was some, catfishing behind the scenes, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Power struggles, as it were. Yeah. But from fans itself, the regular fans, you could go to a convention on your own, knowing you were going to meet people there, and you'd be fine.
Absolutely, and of course there was the local group structure as well, wasn't there?
Of course there was, yeah.
And we had a local group in York, and we had a local group from either Manchester or Liverpool. I think it was Manchester. Came across for one afternoon to a friend's house. It's like 8 people came across in 2 cars and a motorbike. And I'm thinking, my God, cut the M62 on a motorbike just for a little Doctor Who meetup where we chatted a bit, watched a couple of episodes, and had a quiz. How wonderfully 1980s, but everybody got on. We didn't all agree, you're absolutely right, but everybody got on, because it just didn't matter. It was so nice, but like I say, that was then, and this is now, isn't it? Really, I remember the quiz that we had with them, and they'd brought a load of questions for us. We'd prepped a load of questions for them.
Fabulous.
And occasionally we would. I mean, the core of our local group was the same core that had Eye of Horrors. You see, just the 5 of us. Yeah, and a few other peripherals that would float in and float out, and. We would even have little meetings where one of us would prep a quiz for the other 4, and that was, it was just a different time, but it was great fun. And you're right, there was no real nastiness. There was no unpleasantness. Nobody got so outraged that you went to the police to try and get somebody arrested because they said they didn't like Anthony Ainley as compared to Roger Delgado. People just accepted it, rolled with it, and said, well, that's your opinion, this is mine, away we go. Nowadays it's right, onto the police, and the worst thing being the police often turn up.
Yeah, no, they'll listen to the stupidity. Yeah, I mean, that was the thing as well. Do you remember that? I mean, I used to love the quiz things. I used to really look forward to it, because they did take off. And it's nice to see that the equivalent of the local groups in the modern day fandom still do a quiz. Yeah, it's nice.
But then, of course,
still doing it.
The closest I've seen in recent years to our old 1980s quizzes is Who's Master, which we do sporadically. That was great fun.
Yeah, we've got to work on getting that back. Actually, we have to write some questions and get it back.
But
I remember that big discussion that you mentioned there. Anthony Ainley versus Delgado. Do you remember? That's the most controversial we got I think at one of the, it got heated. It got heated, didn't it?
Yeah. It's just like, why do they have to have a false beard? At least Delgado's beard was real.
They were brilliant days. I mean, gosh, it was nothing compared to where we find ourselves today. I used to love the fact as well, and you and I had this in common, of course, is that you used to go to Longleat or places like this. I mean, we have Galaxy 4 from Sheffield in common. And they used to arrange trips, didn't they? Where people would get together, their customer base would get together, and they'd go to Longleat for the big example. I remember going on, and Phil as well, our Phil as well, many happy times where we'd go to Longleat or wherever and have days out.
Mm-hmm.
Those magical times there, and you would meet stars from the show. And it was always different, actually, where you met people who had worked on the show, whether in front of the camera or behind, because the show was not on air anymore. There was a more of a family feel to it. There was more of a casual, we're all in this together now. There's no real celebrity.
Almost like a blitz spirit. People pulled together to keep things going.
It was calmer though, wasn't it? There was a lovely calm. I mean, you could go up to somebody like, God love him, Nick Courtney, in the bar and have a drink with him.
Yeah.
You mentioned, really.
You mentioned that. I mean, we went, 4 of us, 4 of the 5 from York went to Longleat in '83 for the 20th.
Yeah.
And so we all trained it down to Bristol Temple Meads, and then had to, I can't remember if we had to change and get another regional link train and then a taxi to where we were staying, and it was just great. And going to Longleat and seeing all these people in the flesh. And we went into the main tent for the opening presentation from the Marquis of Bath. And I know some people
got in, everybody. This one got in.
Yeah, I got in. Marquis of Bath, as they would say, but I'm from Yorkshire, so it's Marquis of Bath. And we went into the tent, and it was jam-packed. And right at the front was JNT in his big jacket, and he just pointed. Where's my big finger there? He pointed, like, that's what it felt like, a huge finger across the room. And he went like this and called us to the front to sit down, cross-legged at the front. So we were literally at the front of the tent for the opening ceremony. So when Pertwee bursts out the doors with his arms wide, I am the doctor, and all this kind of thing, my God. For a mobile phone then, so you could actually film it, whereas you just had a little crappy film camera and everything. I've got a few pictures, but dear, oh dear. People that you would never have a chance to see. Valentine Dial, and seeing him, and Anthony Ainley without, obviously, his false facial hair.
Did he have my wig on?
He may have done. I mean, Peter Davison, bless him. He was coming out. He got mobbed. He stepped back and stood on my foot. I didn't complain because, I had the doctor's shoe imprint on my foot. And
have you still got it? Yes, I thought
and
so.
3 broken toes.
Yes.
And all the local army cadets doing all the security arrangements and crowd management, not particularly well, but bless them all the same. But Longleat was something else. It really was. You can't sort of like convey what it was like, because it was so exciting. But at the same time, the numbers of people were, if there was ever an example of how the BBC did not have a clue about what property they had, it was Longleat. I'm sure they thought they'd get a few hundred people and that'd be it.
Well, I remember thinking at the time, Peter Davison, Janet Fielding, and Mark Strickson appeared on Saturday Superstore before Longleat, and it was on that day that they said you don't need a ticket anymore, because up until then, of course, it was ticketed. Do you remember? You had to buy your ticket. The BBC were pushing it after every episode of season 20 on the telly. The Radio Times were pushing it. You had to have a ticket. You had to send off for this address. I've still got the letter with all the details back, because it came in a sort of big, heavy paper letter, And I still got that. And it was a case of doing this, and all the preparations and stuff. And then they appear on Saturday Superstore, and they just say, you don't need a ticket now. You can just turn up on the day. And I remember saying at the time to myself, ooh, that's big mistake. And then
it was.
Come to the event, it was, wasn't it? Because you had BBC News on the telly, on the radio saying, please don't go to the Doctor Who exhibition. You're going to be stuck in a queue. You're not going to get there to that day. You're not going to get to Longleat. Don't go anywhere near it. You had the AA giving out warnings. You had the RAC giving out warnings. Please avoid Wiltshire like the plague. It's just...
We were lucky. We went from our accommodation. We went from our accommodation to the event in a taxi. So we didn't have to bother trying to find somewhere to park. We could just literally get dropped and get out. And then on the second day, the Monday, we paid the taxi driver to come and pick us up for the return leg. So we left all our bags in his boot. Ooh. So we weren't weighed down with luggage or anything like that. Bit of a risk maybe, but it was fine. It was the 1980s.
It's the old days, yeah.
Yeah, and it was great for us, but we left about 3:30 for trains and things like that on the Monday afternoon, and there was still queues, all the cars snaking in, still trying to get in, and it was just like such a shame, really. But I mean, it was great, just wandering around and Cybermen wandering around and people dressed as Time Lords and stuff like that, and Sontarans and everything else, and got a few autographs, that you can't get now. Heather Hartnell, for example, things like that.
Bless. Yeah.
But yeah, hell of a time.
It was strange though, because as you say though, the BBC didn't seem to learn from it, because just a couple of short years later, they axed the show. Yeah, and then it goes through all those. It staggers on for 4 final years, doesn't it? Really, it becomes something. Had it had a little bit more time, a little bit more money, and as you say, a few more episodes in the run, it would have been big again. It would have been. I genuinely believe, had they done a better, another season in 1990 with more episodes, it would have been solid. Like you said, through the 90s. But they still didn't realize. They seemed to forget that thousands and thousands of people turned up to support the show in Longleat. And I sometimes look at what Michael Grade says on his interview with Matthew Sweet, isn't it, on the DVD, on one of the Blu-rays. And I'm looking at that interview with Michael Grade. And I actually think, Ian, you've got no clue what you're talking about here, because you're saying that Doctor Who wasn't getting anybody watching. It was getting 7 to 8 million a week. That was a lot then. I think
there was no doubt. There was no doubt that Doctor Who was incredibly popular, because 1983 proved that. And in 1985 they sacked it off.
Yeah.
And in less than 2 years, because in calendar terms it was less than 2 years, you don't lose that amount of love in the public, because by that point it was in the public consciousness and had been for 22 years. And so canning it made no point. I think ultimately Grade brought in his own personal bias, his own personal hatred of it, and his own personal hatred of Colin Baker, because of his, marriage at that point.
Well, he's denied that, hasn't he? He's denied that. He knew he didn't. He's more or less implied, I don't get involved with actors, which I wouldn't expect him to be quite honest. And I love the way he actually sort of dismissed them as beneath him.
I mean, he was quite close friends with Lisa Goddard, wasn't he? And it was very, very coincidental. I mean, allegedly, obviously, everything's alleged.
Right.
But there was a lot of talk about it. I don't think at the time Colin helped himself with his interview that said, sacking will affect Top Def.
That headline he wasn't happy with, though, was he? That article in the Sun, he wasn't happy with that at all. I mean, he
probably could have thought better about doing the interview, to be honest.
It was the money, because he put the money towards the charity. So I can understand why he would do it for getting the money.
Turned around and bit him a bit, didn't it?
Yeah. But I know that they did twist things a little bit, and I know he wasn't happy with it. Yeah.
But I think Grade taking it off, by the time it came back, he'd gone. But at that point, I think it was crippled. So if Grade hadn't taken it off and they'd carried on with put it back to Saturdays, put it back to 25-minute episodes,
Yes.
and keep it going, it would have done just fine, thank you. But I think Grade taking it off, when it came back, it was deeply flawed. And it didn't have a chance each season to establish itself. So the writing was on the wall, sadly. We all tried to see the positives, and Sylvester, I know he's gone off the rails as Sylvester now, like a lot of lovies have. Yeah. But, you supported him at the time and everything else. But I don't know. He wasn't my favourite Doctor. I'm not going to diss him, but he wasn't my favourite Doctor. And Remembrance of the Daleks was fantastic and remains a fantastic Dalek story.
Yeah.
But, there's something to be said for the first four. The first four Doctors.
Yeah.
Really.
We've spoken about this before, haven't we? They've got you can't put your finger on it, but even when you see the pictures in like the monster book or something like that of the first four, there's a magic. There's something there. Yeah.
And it's not because, you look at the monster book, the earlier ones, the Hartnell ones with things like the Zarbi, and you think it's somebody wearing tights and a big fiberglass ant. But you still have a thrill looking at the monster book with pictures of the Zarbi. It's crazy, really. But you're right, there is a certain something that, no disrespect to anybody involved, but there was very little that you could put in a black and white monster book from the 80s that would give you the same kind of thrill. I mean, the Earthshock Cybone are fantastic. I thought the Android in Visitation was fantastic.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
And in some respects, the Pteroleptils as well. But then for every pteroleptil, you have a plasmaton. Don't you?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew the plasmatons were going to come up at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in the plasmatons. Oh, I think it must have been that year in Blackpool in the exhibition, and they looked as bad in real life as they did on the telly. I thought somebody wore that. Somebody actually climbed into that. I'm 12 at the time. 12,
yeah,
13.
I just don't see the point at all. I don't see the point. I mean, they literally just stood there and didn't do anything.
Do you think Time Flight? I'm going to ask you this now. Do you think Time Flight is one of those elements of original Doctor Who stories that, had they had the bigger budget, would have worked better?
Absolutely. I think it was a great idea. Getting access to Concorde was unheard of.
Yes.
Absolutely. He pulled a blinder there. Getting access to a Concorde. My God.
Even people in the BBC didn't believe he'd done that, had they?
Yeah, I think people won't realise these days, they're just on board an aeroplane. No, this was Concorde. It was entirely different. There was security around that like nobody's business.
Exactly.
And he got on. And they also got to film in Heathrow as well, which was like, again, was unheard of.
Yeah. And they don't do it much these days either, do they? You don't really see them doing stuff there because of the security risk, which is
it's so much more
since
now.
1982. Yeah.
And when you consider as well, in the 1980s, certainly in the early 1980s, we had the Republican terrorism with the IRA and everything else. And so there was a huge terrorist threat at the time in the early 80s. Yeah. So it was still, it was still a thing, security. Yeah. But you're right. It's much, much worse now. But I think with a decent budget and perhaps a refined plot, because sometimes it was, let's just get the Master in there for no reason. I mean, why was he dressed as Khalid? Why?
Because he knew the Doctor would turn up eventually.
Yeah. But you could just put a false beard on, couldn't you? When or another false beard on when he showed up, and save yourself the hassle in the meantime. I mean, all that standing in front of a globe in full makeup, going Shazim Shazam. I mean, good God, come on.
Yeah, you got to forgive certain things like that, haven't you? Really, you got.
But it was like, didn't Doctor Who do this though? You'd have the Caves of Androzani, which was possibly the best Doctor Who story ever, and then you followed it with Twin Dilemma.
Yeah,
and then you had You had Earthshock, which was possibly the most action-packed story of the 80s, apart
so
from
exciting.
Tales of Androzani, and you follow it with Time Lash.
Yeah.
Here's what you could have had. You know, it was.
You mentioned that word again, didn't you? Time Lash.
Yeah, sorry.
But then again, you could argue that they do it today as well. Except it's because the consistency in the 80s, especially as you're saying, was quite varied. You know.
Yeah. And I've just realised as well. I said, yeah, you followed Earthshot with Time Lash. You didn't. You followed it with Time Flight. But Time Lash was another thing that we don't talk about. Sorry, Paul. And more, sorry, Phil. It's Phil that likes it, isn't it? Paul doesn't.
Phil loves Time Lash.
Yeah.
But you could say that you could argue today. I would certainly argue from this point of view today. I would rather watch anything from the 80s, including Time Lash and Time Flight, over anything that we've just had over the last couple of years produced in the Disney years. And I certainly wouldn't go and look at the Chibnall years for other reasons. But you know, the consistency that we've had in, what was it, 24, 25 was so silly, so low, not there at all. He obviously tried to do some sort of consistency, but it wasn't one that you actually cared about because the bar was so low from each episode. I mean, you started with Space Babies, for crying out loud. And that was on the back of the 3 ridiculous Tennant episodes, which was supposed to be celebrating 60 years of Doctor Who and didn't. They failed spectacularly. Then you had that Ruby Road thing, which was just, well, it was all forgettable. I can remember every line from Time Flight, if I have to.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? There's certain things. Sometimes you only have to see it once, and those lines just sit in your head. I think partially remembering the lines and things. You know, Logopolis, I have a place in mind that's on the way where, give or take a parsec or two, it's my home from home. It's called Earth. You know, and you just remember it. You remember the line, probably because we'd originally record everything on audio cassette and listen to it over and over and over. So it sits in there, doesn't it? But whereas nowadays, I mean, you say that they didn't get consistency. They did. They were consistently crap. And that's where the bar was set. Yeah. They did get consistency, but it wasn't consistency in a right way. And, you know, they should have given up long before.
I don't know if I've said this before, but I've got this theory now that it's as though they're just churning things out to get things badged and labeled as Doctor Who to try and make money off marketing and a product.
Yeah.
I don't feel, what do you think about it? I don't feel there's any love or care over Doctor Who anymore.
No, I would agree. I think it is just churn of merchandise. But the problem they've got, of course, is that the merchandise isn't selling.
Apparently
you compare the sales of a Gatwa series DVD and a box set of Classic Who. You know, for every one that Gatwa sold, and it probably is just one, there's probably 10, 20, 30,000, no joke, of the box sets that are sold.
And they still stay in the, I always look at the Amazon charts, as you know, and they're still there. And the brilliant thing about the original series is it gets 2 goes. It gets the limited edition, and then it gets the standard edition. And both of them get to #1 in the charts on a release. And then they stay there. So you can actually go and look at the Amazon charts now and look at the Doctor Who Blu-ray collections. And they're all still around.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not the same people buying it. It's not the same people buying it. You know, I mean, I won't buy the standard ones because I prefer the Blu-ray special editions, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I know you prefer to wait for the other one, the standards, to come out.
Yes, but I'm cheap.
But you wouldn't buy both, and I wouldn't buy both. So it's separate people buying it. It's additional audiences, which, you know, that just isn't going to happen with Whittaker or with Chibnall, or with the majority of the new series stuff, to be quite honest. It's just nobody's interested. That there's, I think there's a fatigue. All the Whittaker dolls, all the Gatwa dolls, and everything else. That none of it's selling. So they've shelled out for the manufacturing, and now they're shelling out for the storage, and ultimately they'll be shelling out for the disposal as well, because just nobody is interested. And as we know already, from several years ago, the audience that they're pandering to are a very transient audience that go from from property to property, Star Trek to Star Wars to Doctor Who, just to impose an ideology and get it to reflect their lifestyle, and then move on to something else when they've destroyed it, like locusts in a way. And that audience doesn't buy merchandise. They say they don't buy merchandise. So why produce it? If you're producing a series to that audience, why produce merchandise for that? Because you're not going to sell it. We're not going to buy it because it isn't for us. So
I still don't understand why people who are allegedly adult can't see this.
Yeah.
I think it's shocking.
Supposedly in the business.
No business sense.
Yeah, none at all. None at all. And again, it goes back to what we said. In the real world, you would get sacked for this.
Yeah, for loss.
But for some reason, they don't. And I don't know why. I don't understand it.
You're right, though, aren't you? Because, there's an awful lot of the alleged activists, because as far as I'm concerned, as a person that was an activist in the late 80s and through the 90s, I don't consider anybody that uses that level, that word today, as an activist at all. I think, no, you're just a troublemaker, quite frankly, because, you've brought issues in that shouldn't have to be looked at again. But these alleged activists that were in purely because there was a female doctor don't seem to have been retained. They don't seem to have stayed with the show as soon as he was made back into a man.
No, absolutely not. And Gat was certainly not managed to bring in a new audience.
No.
So when all those left after Whittaker, he didn't bring any new ones in, despite what certain drag queens said about for everyone leaving, another 5 will come. That just shows the height of the delusion. They think everybody thinks as they do. They genuinely believe everybody thinks what they think. And the problem for them is that they can't wrap their tiny little brains around the fact that actually the majority of people don't. You are in a tiny, tiny, tiny minority.
And a bubble as well. They're in a very poisonous bubble. And it is a poisonous bubble because they're the ones that judge everybody else. But it's weird, isn't it? Because you mentioned Gatwood there as well. And I think we actually spoke about it at the time. But there was an awful lot of emphasis, however, how many followers he had on Instagram or whatever it's going to be. Not one of them seemed to appear at Doctor Who because the ratings were going down. So this assumption that's going on today that, he's popular and he can bring, or she's popular, and he or she can bring that to this element of the show. That's all around show business now. We'll hire such and such a person and put them in our play because we expect thousands of people to come and buy tickets. It doesn't happen. And Doctor Who has just proved that completely, isn't it? So why are they continuing to do it? Why is it always about personality rather than the ability?
I just think they don't have an ability to learn from their mistakes. I mean, it is literally the epitome of stunt casting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they're doing it to try and get some kind of reflected popularity bounce in your viewing figures, but it doesn't work like that. And that's why RTD's been trying to turn it towards the TikTok generation. But what's the point? Just focus on your audience. As we've said before on the show, if you produce a decent quality show, people will watch it. The Traitors proved that. Gavin and Stacey proved that. Wallace and Gromit proved that. But for some reason, they can't seem to get it. And if they can't get it repeatedly, as they haven't for years now, they are the wrong people in the job. But the BBC still seems to stick with them, and I don't know why. No. It makes an absolute mockery of it, really. But I think that's ultimately why we're in the state that we're in.
I mean, one of the reasons I think they're always aiming things at the Toki-Tiki generation is simply because they need those kids to come on board to pay a license fee in the future.
And they're not going to.
No, they're not going to. No. And we also know now as well. We know now as well that thanks to Bedouia, who's looked at the ratings for us on lots of different things, we know now that the audience for that old crone's Drag Race, where they all seem to think that's the audience we want, is dropping dramatically as people get fed up because it's becoming out of fashion. So that's the wrong audience to go for. You need to go for your wide audience, of which there are millions now in the UK, because the wide audience will decide if it's a good show, I will watch this and I'm going to watch this all the time. I like this. rather than aiming at minorities and trying to bring the minorities in.
Yeah.
It's not going to work that way.
No, it's not at all. And I think the generation that they're going for, it's pointless seeing them as future license fee payers, because they absolutely won't. They won't want to pay, which by the time they're license fee payers, it's going to be 200 quid or whatever. They're not going to want to pay a £200 subscription. If they can't get it off their parents, then they're not interested. They'll pick it up on their phones or whatever, and they won't be traceable. And there's nothing the BBC will be able to do about it. And if they try and bring in some kind of blocking, they'll use VPNs because they're tech savvy when it comes to that. So they will get round it. And the BBC are shooting themselves in the foot again. But, you know, and this is why the BBC really does need to be put as a subscription only model, because then they really will have a gun to their heads which says you need to produce quality drama that the majority of people want to watch, or else. And that or else is you'll go out of business, because you're now having to follow a proper business model for the first time in your existence. You're going to have to treat it as a business model and not something that is just leeching off the British public.
Absolutely.
Which is what they're doing now.
They've got to stop punishing those members of the British public that still pay the license fee, because they're putting it up again. And let's face it, it's going yearly now, where they put it up yearly. So these people that are being loyal, in a sense, to the BBC and retaining their license fee are being punished because they have to pay for the people that have decided, I want nothing to do with the BBC. It's shocking.
It's an absolute disgrace, as is the fact that they took it away from pensioners. The free license that made pensioners pay for it.
We know why. We know why, because the pensioners were going to be watching the BBC, and because they're of a generation that are honest and good. If they're told, "Oh, right, we're taking that away from you, you have to pay for it," they'll pay for it.
Yeah,
they won't question it. They'll just pay for it.
It's exploitation in a way. It's an exploitation in a way.
There's no young ones paying for it. So it's like with some of the jobs, isn't it? We're being told now as a generation, again, for what, the third, fourth time, you're going to have to work longer because there's nobody coming up behind us. That's not our issue. Being told you have to work into your 70s, properly into your 80s now. Bugger off. I'm not doing that.
And you have a situation whereby people don't want to work to save for pension or anything like that, because there's unfortunately, not wanting to make it look like I'm just sort of like down on the current younger generation, but being a cranky old git, but you know, you had to work to build up for a pension. You had to work to afford a mortgage for a house. Now we want houses. We don't want to work for them. We just want. It's almost like that. There's a desire to get the rewards without the effort in the first place. In which case, it's not a reward; it becomes an entitlement, and that's frustrating. When you put all the effort in for years, which goes back to the pensioners. You know, they've contributed to society more than anybody else, and they deserve a few things for free. They've put the effort in, but no, they're being made to pay for it because the BBC know they're a soft touch. It's not right.
To be honest, you know, the nearer I get to 60, the more I see that point of view. And I'm very much of the case that is, when you do get to that pensionable age, you should be getting things for free because you've put in since the age of 14, 15 years old, whatever it is. You deserve to have that break. So for them to turn around to our generation and say, you're probably going to be working to your late 70s, early 80s. Well, no. Hang on. We've done our bit more than twice over, thank you. And we've been through God knows what. How many recessions? We've been through, you know, the C word. We've been through all that sort of stuff. We've held up, we've done our bit just as much as the generations before us. Yeah.
And you say the C word, which obviously, because you've still got to be careful mentioning that word online.
Still can't get over it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. But we still maintained our resilience as well, our mental resilience. And
I worked all the way through that.
Yeah, me too.
Found a way and made it work. And thanks to my effort, the organization I was working with at the time got through it, because it wouldn't have done without me.
No.
And my work
crazy
ethic.
World, though, wasn't it? Crazy
Absolutely.
world.
And
it was almost like something out of science fiction, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, but we haven't quite recovered. We're still, because it went crazy and it all went idiotical. We're still seeing that now, I think, today, 5 years after. Listen, we're coming towards the end of our time together, but before we go, or as Kermit used to say, before we go, I have to ask you about that beautiful police box behind you. Where's that from?
This is a 10th planet Earth. It's a 10th planet Earth replica of the Cushing box. I think it's a quarter scale of the Cushing box, which I keep Doctor Who magazines in, and I've now illuminated the inside. I'm working on the flashing light at the top. It did have a rudimentary bulb in the top, but it wasn't particularly fantastic. So LEDs now are a lot brighter. So I'm working on that.
Yeah.
But it's one of my three. I've got the K9, of course, and I've got the Dalek Sec. Those are my three This Planet Earth artifacts. I don't want to call them toys because they're not, but you know what I mean. But I do love it. I love this box. It's gorgeous. I've had it. Oh, blimey! I've had it about 20 odd years now. But
wow.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's held up well. It's a little bit chipped and battered, but then the police box was always battered, wasn't it? Always. Terrence Dix always described it as a battered blue box.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I love it. Like I say, it's a good repository for Doctor Who magazines.
It looks fantastic
from the day when I bought Doctor Who magazine, of course.
Yeah, it looks brilliant. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I love it. Nice and solid. It's not. It's one of the things I always wanted. Just like a room and the TARDIS sat in a corner somewhere, so you could just turn. Same with Dalek Seku's over there and everything. It's like you just look up and you glance, and it still gives you a bit of a thrill, even though he's not a classic Dalek. Because my favourite is Planet of the Daleks, era Daleks, that livery and everything else. Yeah. But he's still gorgeous and everything. But the police box is a very, very, very treasured thing. And I just think adding the lights inside just gives it a certain something as well.
It certainly does. Yeah, it really makes it work, doesn't it? Brings it to life.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have the lights on more in some of our Who's Views going forward. Just for fun. Why not?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Listen, Ian, as ever, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on to Chit Chat.
No, thank you. I've been looking forward to this, but I've really enjoyed it.
Good.
We could go on for hours, couldn't we? We could go on for hours.
We could do. Yeah, we could do. But we won't at the moment. But listen, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this Chit Chat with Ian. If you have, please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you're new to the channel. If you've only just found us, we've got lots of content on our playlist for you. If you aren't new to the channel, please make sure you're still subscribed.
Yeah,
lovely to see you. Thanks very much for joining us. From Ian and myself, until we see you again on the channel. Ta-ra, take care. Thank you.
Bye.